of Kuwait for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on acceding to the presidency in March, and I do wish you every success in this. And I would also like to thank the Equatorial Guinean presidency for the presidency of February. Mr. President, we are grateful to the chairperson in office of the OSCE, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovakia, Miroslav Lajcik, for his substantive annual briefing on the work of his organization and issues on its agenda. The period of his chairmanship of your country in the OSCE is coming at a difficult time. The foundations of multilateralism and international law in and of itself, all of these things are being sorely tested. We are recently hearing about rules-based situations as well, rules-based order. We want to focus on a constructive cooperation with the Slovak chairpersonship of the OSCE. We consider that the OSCE should strive to implement those functions for which it was set up, and precisely being a forum for equal dialogue and the adoption of collective decisions on security issues. A focus should be on issues of combating terrorism, drugs trafficking, cyber threats, harmonizing integration processes, supporting traditional values, the protection of the rights of national minorities, and countering neo-Nazism. We are banking on ongoing constructive cooperation between the OSCE and the UN in these particular areas. Much has already been done here. It's also important to implement the OSCE's confidence measures. Their aim is to decrease the risk of outbreaks of conflict in the ICT area by preventing the militarization of the information area and by preventing interference within states by others and violating the digital sovereignty. As regards the intention to include on the OSCE agendas topics that do not fall under its remit, namely reform and management of the security sector, we believe that work here should be conducted in the UN based on Security Council Resolution 2151. It pertains to countries that were fully destroyed by conflicts and are still in a post-conflict reconstruction phase. There are no such countries in the OSCE area. You, Mr. Lajcik, have excellent experience as the president of the GA of the UN, and you well know the organization. You know that international organizations cannot act in isolation. In this specific context, we consider cooperation between the World Organization and regional and sub-regional organizations based on the UN Charter, Chapter 8, and the Permanent Declaration of the Council of 2006 of the OSCE. Cooperation between the UN and the OSCE in the field should assist stabilization in the OSCE area. This stabilization is not possible without the Kosovo settlement based on Resolution 1244 and without finding compromise to the Transnistria and Nagorno-Karabakh conflicts. It's not possible without establishing a depoliticized dialogue between Georgia, Abkhazia, and South Ossetia as part of the Geneva discussions on security in the Caucasus. We hope that the implementation of the OSCE Council of Ministers declaration in Milan on the Mediterranean will lead to more stability in this region and in European countries. We continue to participate in the structured dialogue on security threats that in and of itself are confidence-building measures and can pave the way to improve the situation in the Euro-Atlantic if, of course, this format is not politicized. And if we are to listen to some speakers today and not understand what the OSCE does, one might have the impression that Vienna just looks at situations in Ukraine and in the post-Soviet area as a whole. And this is something that's confusing that our Western partners want to drill into people's minds. We mustn't forget that the OSCE has 57 member countries and it deals with security issues in a whole, working to promote stability, peace and democracy with 1 billion people. Within here, control of weapons and arms, combating terrorism, combating human trafficking, and dealing with the media and ethnic minorities. All of these issues are discussed as well. The problems in these spheres is one that the West has talked enough about, and so we'd call for this to stop. Unfortunately, talking about the OSCE's work, we cannot ignore, nonetheless, the intra-Ukrainian crisis. On the 12th of February, the Security Council met to discuss this because of the 4th anniversary of the signing of the package of measures on the implementation of the Minsk agreements. We're grateful to the head of the SMM of the OSCE, Mr. Abakan, for his frank assessment of the situation on the ground, and in particular for his confirmation that there is no evidence of Russian military presence in Donbass. During the adoption in 2015 of Council Resolution 2202 that endorsed the package of measures as the basis for Ukrainian settlement, all members of the Security Council confirmed that a key for stabilization in the country is the comprehensive implementation of the Minsk agreements. The members of the Council thus repeated this in June 2018 when they adopted a presidential statement to support these agreements. They repeated this on the 12th of February. We also, I am sure, heard the words for support of Minsk today. However, things are right where they started. Nothing has moved. We need to confess that without good faith implementation by Kiev of Minsk, a real settlement will not be achieved. Kiev is openly sabotaging the Minsk agreements and focusing everything and putting all the blame on Russia. And this is precisely what Western partners are doing as well. And we heard that today on more than one occasion. The sabotage of Kiev is only possible because it is being sponsored by Western countries. Settlement is not possible without consent of the people in the region. Here in the UN, this is called inclusivity. This principle pertains to the OSCE as well. In Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, everywhere, we would urge the opposing parties to sit down around the negotiation table and to find compromise. But for Donbass and its citizens, for some reason, this is not relevant. We are directly interested in a swift conclusion of the conflict in Ukraine. We would urge the SMM of the OSCE to step up its monitoring activities in Donbass. There's a need not for fragmented information, but a comprehensive look at the situation regarding the armed forces in Ukraine. It needs to be clearly defined as to which parties are firing and which parties are provoking the outbreaks. And provoking the ongoing outbreaks of violence, provoking the shellings as well. The impact on the civilians is significant, as is the destruction of civilian infrastructure. We will insist that the SMM continue to report on this particular issue. Would report specific thematical reports on this issue. However, we'd like to remind you that the mandate of the OSCE is not just focused to Donbass. In fact, it pertains to the whole of the Ukrainian territory. And it actually refers to all sorts of different human rights aspects, falsification of history, persecution of journalists, and all other issues. So issues such as the falsification of history, persecution of journalists, that in Ukraine are dangerously spreading, they're also paid attention to by Ukraine as well. We are struck by the letter that was written to ODIHR by the head of the Ukrainian, Mr. Klink, that was published on the 9th of January, that said that they will not authorize the Russians to participate in presidential election observation. And this is a blatant discriminatory ban. That's a gross violation of the fundamental acts of the OSCE, in particular Article 8 of the Copenhagen Document of 1990. Mr. President, Russia considers the OSCE as an important mechanism to build an equal and indivisible system of European security and is interested in strengthening its role and prestige. We would like to wish Slovakia effective work at the helm of the OSCE in the interests of cooperation and security of all countries. We are prepared to have a frank and equal dialogue on all spectres of issues on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Je remercie le représentant.
I thank the representative of the Russian